Welcome back to Sleepy Palm Island. Tonight, in a quiet house where the family sleeps, a father finds an old telescope in the attic, and it stirs a warm memory of nights spent with his grandpa, sharing quiet words of wisdom in the treehouse out in the yard. Feel the breeze beginning to slow, your body lightening as the story carries you deeper into rest. Evening folded itself through the house in quiet layers of light and scent. The day, almost spent, breathed from the windows, a faint gold giving way to blue. The air was heavy with supper's warmth, baked bread cooling on the table, the sweetness of roasted vegetables still clinging to the air, the soft trace of mint tea in a forgotten cup. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, the sound drifting, dissolving. The ceiling fan turned above the table, stirring that familiar perfume of home, the comfort of cooked food, a trace of soap from clean dishes, the deep warmth that wood releases when the day has ended. In the living room, a lamp glowed behind its linen shade. The light spread thinly across the shelves, across the cat sleeping in a small curl beneath. The quiet settled deep, wrapping the rooms in a slow, steady calm. He walked softly through it, his steps absorbed by the warmth that lingered in the floorboards. The wood answered each movement with a gentle sigh. The warmth lingered around him, steady and familiar, the kind that gathers in a family home, built from years of voices, shared meals, and quiet evenings that never really leave. And through it all, the hallway clock measured the moment, one slow, forgiving tick after another, as if it too wished to fall asleep. A gentle draught carried in the rustle of leaves from the garden and the faint hum of night insects. It was that hour when the day lets go, when the world inside the house grows tender and still. He paused by the doorway of his child's room. Inside, a small night lamp painted a circle of amber on the wall. The child slept on his side, one hand near his cheek, the other holding a small stuffed bear. The rhythmic sound of his breathing filled the room with calm. Beside the bed, on the small nightstand, lay a photograph, a mountain slope, a blue sky, and the wooden house perched among branches. He looked at it for a long moment. That image always stirred something inside him, a blend of distance and belonging. He adjusted the blanket around the child's shoulders and stood quietly, listening to the hush that wrapped the room. Then he stepped back into the hallway, careful not to disturb the door. The corridor was dim, lit only by the spill of amber from the night lamp. On the wall hung coats, a straw hat, a few children's drawings held up by magnets on a board. He walked slowly, his fingers brushing the wall as he went, feeling the texture of the paint beneath his skin. Every surface here carried a memory, fingerprints, laughter, the faint echo of years that had gathered quietly between these walls. When he reached the foot of the stairs, he paused. Above him, the small attic hatch rested in shadow, its outline barely visible against the wooden ceiling, waiting quietly, like a door to another time. It had been years since he'd opened it, though he passed beneath it every day. Its pool remained the same. Tonight, something gentle urged him upward. Not nostalgia exactly, but something softer. The need to touch a place that had been silent too long. He opened the attic door with a quiet pull, and the wooden ladder unfolded toward him, breathing out a faint sigh of dust and time. Warm air met his face first, dry, still, carrying the scent of wood and paper that had been waiting for years. Downstairs, the sounds of the evening still lingered, the low hum of the refrigerator, a clock, the last faint echo of footsteps in the hallway. Then came a moment of silence. He exhaled, and it felt like releasing the weight of the whole day, the noise, the words, the screens, the endless lists. Up here, everything slowed. He climbed carefully, each step pressing into the wood with a low, familiar creak. The smell changed as he ascended. First, the faint sweetness of old paper, then the deeper tone of pine beams, soaked in years of sunlight. When he reached the top, he pushed the hatch open. The air inside was still, almost sacred, thick with the quiet of forgotten seasons. He reached for the small cord hanging from the ceiling and pulled it. The bulb flickered once, twice, then glowed with its steady amber light. It wasn't bright. It spread like honey, filling corners softly, touching the rafters, the crates, the uneven edges of the room. He paused at the threshold, letting his eyes adjust. It always felt like stepping into another world, one that didn't belong to time. Downstairs was the present, warm light, the sound of dishes, a child asleep. But here, the air belonged to memory. It smelled like ink and sawdust and patience. Every surface held traces of another time. Small things, kept with quiet care, waiting to be found again on an evening like this. He took a few steps forward. The boards under his feet groaned softly, like the house was waking to his presence. He ran his hand along the beam near the entrance. The dust brushed away in a small cloud, releasing a faint scent of old wax. His fingertips came away grey, and he smiled. It was the same smell as his grandfather's workshop when he was small, and watching him carve boats from scraps of wood. A warmth rose in his chest, slow and steady. He crouched by the nearest crate, untied the rope that held it closed. The lid lifted with a dry sand, the smell of paper and varnish rising at once. Inside, sketches rolled and yellowed, a stack of notebooks bound with fraying thread, a small tin of screws and nails that chimed faintly as he moved them. He touched the notebooks carefully, almost reverently. The edges were fragile, but the pages within still held their shape, their faint pencil markings like breath captured in time. He opened one, a drawing of a riverbank, clumsy handwriting labeling stones and birds. A boy's handwriting, his. He exhaled slowly, eyes tracing the familiar, uneven lines. For a moment, the air seemed to ripple. He closed the notebook gently, like closing a window between worlds. Another box, smaller, heavier. He lifted the lid. Inside were objects wrapped in old cloth. A compass, its glass fogged, the brass rim darkened with age. A pocket knife with initials carved faintly into the handle. and a bundle of yellowed Polaroid photos tied with a thin ribbon, their edges curled and soft. He untied the ribbon. The photographs slid into his hands, blurred faces, a picnic by a lake, a porch lit by late summer sun. He traced one thumb across the image, feeling the faint texture of time pressed into the paper. It wasn't just memory returning. It was the room itself, breathing those moments back into him. The attic wasn't only a room. It was a crossing, a quiet bridge between who he had been and who he had become. Every box was a threshold, every object a voice still speaking softly through time. He moved slowly from one crate to another, his movements quieter now, more deliberate, as if afraid to break the silence. A set of wooden toys, a small car with one wheel missing, a folded paper plane with a faded drawing on its wing. He brushed away a strand of cobweb that hung from a beam and felt the slight resistance of time itself. The bulb hummed faintly above, steady and low. Its glow made the dust in the air shimmer like floating golden ash. He sat on a crate near the center of the attic. He leaned back on his hands and let his eyes wander across the slanted beams, the old chest near the wall, the draped sheet that covered something large, maybe a chair, maybe an old piece of furniture. It didn't matter. Everything here had the same quiet dignity of having been made, used, loved, and kept. He let his mind drift. There was no reason to hurry. He didn't need to find anything. Being here was enough. The world below felt distant, softened, blurred, like a dream still holding on to its shape. He reached for another object nearby. A long wooden case, narrow and familiar. When he lifted it, the lid creaked slightly, hinges stiff from disuse. Inside, a telescope. The brass had dulled into a gentle bronze, the glass clouded but unbroken. He ran his thumb along its edge. The metal was cold and smooth, and a small shiver ran through his palm. He smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, the kind that comes when something long forgotten suddenly feels close again. Something in him knew this weight, this exact touch, the way the air seemed to pause when it appeared. He lifted it slowly, turned toward the small attic window. Outside, the night lay wide and deep, spilling its quiet into the room. Through the glass, he could see the dark outline of trees rolling down the hill, a wide stretch of green fading into shadow, where the last light of evening lingered softly over the quiet land. The lens cleared, the lights sharpened, the breath in his chest slowed. He felt something shift inside, subtle and deep, as if a door long closed had opened without sound, and in that quiet shimmer of dust and light, the years loosened, and he was back in the treehouse, the lamp already glowing through the branches. Inside the treehouse, the air was soft with warmth and old wood. The lamp's flame leaned once, then steadied, tracing thin lines of light across the table. The boy sat cross-legged beside his grandfather, cocoa between his palms, its surface trembling faintly with the wind that passed through the open window. Below them, the city glowed like a living constellation, slow rivers of light crossing through shadow. The boy watched them, then turned his gaze toward the flame. "Everything feels so still," he whispered. The old man smiled. "Stillness is never empty," he said. "It's just movement, too slow for the eye to catch." The boy listened. The leaves rubbed softly against the wooden walls. "You see," the old man continued, "everything has its own rhythm. Water doesn't rush to reach the sea. It finds its way by simply moving. And that's how peace works too. Not from holding on, but from letting each thing move at its own pace." The boy's eyes followed the lantern's light as it slid along the edge of the telescope. He whispered, "Like when we built this treehouse together?" "Yes," the old man said. "One board, one nail, one evening at a time. Little was planned. Most of it came from doing. One board placed after another, the shape revealing itself along the way. That's how most good things begin. quietly without knowing the ending. He reached over and turned the windmill by its thin bamboo blade. It turned once and caught the air. Even this moves when the air touches it, he said. Everything responds to something. The trick is to notice what touches you and what you touch back. The boy nodded slowly. He didn't answer, but his shoulders relaxed, as if the thought itself had settled somewhere inside him. Do you know what I've learned? The old man said after a pause. The world doesn't need us to control it, only to listen. When you stop arguing with life, it starts to carry you instead of pushing. Time isn't against us, it's with us, shaping quietly, rounding the edges. He lifted his cup and looked at the boy over the rim. The cocoa had cooled, a thin layer of light catching on its surface. Nothing truly ripens in noise, he said. It's the silence that finishes the work. Outside, the wind gathered softly, a tide in the leaves. The boy leaned closer to the window, peering at the far horizon. Those lights down there, he said. It looks like the sky fell into the earth. The old man's voice was almost a whisper. Each one of those lights is a dream still burning. The same fire that glows in the stars glows there and here too. He tapped a finger gently against his chest. One life, many forms. The boy rested his chin on his knees. It's strange, he said. The city feels so far, but I can almost hear it breathing. That's because you're listening with more than your ears, the old man replied. When the mind quiets, you start hearing with the whole body, the floorboards, the air, even the spaces between sounds, all of it part of the same song. He leaned back, eyes half closed, voice low and slow. We spend so much of life chasing meaning as if it hides somewhere else. But meaning lives in the way you stir a cup, or how you wait for someone to finish a thought. attention. That's where life begins to glow. The boy smiled faintly, watching the flame in the lantern tilt and steady again. "I like it here," he said. "It feels like time stopped." The old man shook his head softly. "Time never stops. It just slows down enough for us to see its kindness. It takes, yes, but only to make room for what's growing underneath. When you trust it, it always gives something back, just in another form." He took the telescope and aimed it toward the horizon, where the mountains rose dark and clear. "Look," he said. The boy leaned in and pressed his eye to the glass. The stars filled the circle, bright and patient, their light sharp as breath on cold glass. He stared until his eyes watered. "The sky," the old man said quietly, "is the oldest memory we share. It never forgets us, no matter where you go. Look up. It will remind you how wide life truly is, and how small the troubles are inside that space." The boy lowered the telescope and looked through the open window instead. The night breeze brushed his face. He could smell wood, cocoa, and the faint sweetness of tree resin warming near the lamp. His voice was softer now. "It's strange. When you talk, it feels like the air listens too." The old man chuckled. "That's because the air is alive, same as we are. Everything you say, every breath you take, the world keeps it, not as words, but as movement. Nothing disappears, it just changes the room it lives in." He paused, eyes tracing the slow spin of the windmill shadow on the wall. "Even people," he added, "when they leave, they don't vanish. They become part of quieter places. You can still feel them in the wind, or in the way the heart softens for no reason. Life doesn't end. It breathes in circles." The flame in the lamp grew lower. The light turned honey deep, then amber. The walls seemed to sigh, as if the treehouse itself was beginning to rest. The boy's eyelids grew heavier, his voice slow between breath. Grandpa, will I ever build something like this? The old man looked around the room. The handmade shelves, the carvings, the uneven walls that had kept their warmth through many years. You will, he said. Different wood, different hands, but the same care. Purpose isn't something you find. It grows from attention. When you tend one small thing long enough, meaning gathers around it, the way light gathers around a candle. The boy smiled and murmured something lost to the rhythm of his breathing. Outside, the tree swayed, and the world below shimmered with slow light. The old man kept speaking, but softer now, almost to the night itself. Simplicity is where peace hides. The mind clears when it stops carrying so much. That's why the sea, the wind, and the stars feel so honest. They hold nothing they don't need. He looked down at the boy, now nearly asleep, and continued in a whisper. Roots don't hold us back. They keep us steady. The deeper they go, the calmer the wind feels. Remember where you come from. The patience, the kindness, and standing becomes easy. The boy's breathing evened. The flame dropped lower still, until it looked more like memory than light. The city in the distance blurred, a quiet shimmer on the edge of the dark. The old man's final words folded into the sound of the night. Everything finds its way. Water, stars, people, all flowing toward home. Nothing to chase, nothing to prove, only the quiet work of becoming. The lamp flickered once, then steadied, a small sun at the heart of the wooden room. The treehouse breathed. The city breathed. And somewhere between them, sleep gathered like a slow tide, carrying both generations into the same gentle rhythm. The rhythm of life, continuing its patient work through the night. The boy's head rested against the wall. The wood was warm from the day, still holding the memory of sunlight. His breath slowed until it matched the soft creak of the house. The old man watched the rhythm and smiled, the way one smiles when time itself begins to blur. Outside, the tree swayed, quiet and sure, its roots deep in the dark soil. Its branches whispering to the wind, trading stories too slow for words. The old man's voice came again, but lighter now, half carried by air. "You can rest now," he said. "The night will hold what you can't." The boy's fingers still touched the grain of the table, tracing one small circle again and again. The lamp flickered, and the circle of light grew smaller, gathering them inside its calm center. "Everything that moves," the old man murmured, "moves toward stillness. And in that stillness, something larger keeps breathing for us." The room exhaled. A single spark drifted from the wick, rising and vanishing before it reached the ceiling. "You know," he said softly, "even silence is alive. It listens, it shapes, it carries every sound that ever passed through it. That's what we return to when the day is done. A silence that remembers." The boy's eyes fluttered once. He didn't answer, but his lips curved, as if the thought itself was a lullaby. The old man reached to adjust the blanket around him. The fabric brushed against the wood, making the smallest sound, like a sigh finding its way home. "The stars are still out there," he whispered. "They'll keep their watch. They've been watching longer than anyone knows." He leaned back in the chair. The wind found the open window again and moved through gently, carrying with it a soft rhythm. Leaves against bark, the faint pulse of the city, the sound of a distant ocean folding against the shore. And inside that rhythm, all thoughts began to dissolve. The words turned thin, then transparent, then weightless. Time stretched, not forward, not backward, just outward, like light in water. The boy's breathing deepened. The old man's breath joined it. Two currents moving together, then slowly becoming one. Everything finds its way, he whispered again. The sentence had no edges now, only warmth, only motion. It all returns to what it loves, the tree to the earth, the wave to the sea, the heart to its quiet. The lamp trembled, then steadied, the glow dimmed to the color of memory. The walls lost their sharpness. The air itself turned golden and slow. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain. One drop touched a leaf somewhere below, and that single sound rippled upward through the branches, through the wooden frame, through the floor beneath their feet. A soft pulse, the tree breathing. The boy's hand slid from the table, settling beside him. The cup cooled, its last wisp of steam rising like a thought leaving the mind. The old man's voice was almost gone now, but it left behind a vibration, like the memory of a note that continues long after the string stops moving. You're part of all of it, he said, barely above a breath. Part of the tree, part of the wind, part of the stillness that holds them both. The sound folded into itself, like water folding back into the sea. The lantern dimmed once more, then rested, and in the silence that followed, there was only the night, spacious, endless, kind. The city below sank into deeper shadow. The stars above stretched farther apart. Between them, the treehouse floated like a small heart of light, beating slower, softer, until the breath of the world and the breath of the boy became the same. And then everything was simply breathing. Nothing more to think, nothing left to say. Only warmth, only sleep, only the quiet rhythm of life, continuing its patient work through the night.